Hey, welcome to the Table Talks podcast for a special At the Movies edition. For those who are new to Echo.Church, every summer at Echo, we spend a few weeks together unpacking stories of popular films, how they connect with the human experience, and ultimately spiritual principles and what they teach us about God and his story. So I'm here with Pastor Filipe, who taught week 1 for At the Movies. And the film we're unpacking today was the highest grossing movie worldwide in 2023. It became a cultural phenomenon across the world. It tackled topics of gender inequality, all kinds of stereotypes, the purpose of existence, and maybe most importantly, the role of horses in the patriarchy.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. So my first question, I think before we unpack some of the meat and the content of this message and this movie is, why do you think it had such an inordinate impact culturally, worldwide? What was this story specifically? Because it does feel silly on the premise of it.
It does, yeah. I mean, I was hesitant initially when I saw it too. I was like, Barbie, what the heck? Yeah. But Barbie was such an iconic part of culture, even not just in America, but growing up in Brazil, I saw my sister play with Barbies, and it was like worldwide thing. And it did always have a little bit of that controversy of like, it is a symbol of, women, being liberated, whatever, but it also had like the stereotypical Barbie figure that all the girls could never achieve with the waist about this thin. So it always had a little bit of that weird thing. So I think the controversy is probably part of why it became so big. And then the way that they ended up doing the role reversal in such a funny, twisted way of like putting women in the same way as men live today and dominate culture, it messes with you in your mind. Yeah. And I think the way that they did that felt so real in a way, and eye-opening, that it caused just a lot of emotion. And then the reality that it is true that in many ways women have been, belittled in culture, and the way that it displayed this like drive to bring equality to a different level. And then the final twist of the movie, that it wasn't actually just swinging the other direction, but then there was like maybe we can coexist in this value system of men and women. Yeah. There was a lot of twists in the movie that made just feel emotion. And I think it's part of what made it so big. Yeah. I think you talked about the controversy a little bit. I do think that helps spur on the momentum of it and why so many people were talking about this film, right? Yeah. Like on one end of the ideological spectrum, you had people saying, oh, it's bringing to light these topics of gender inequalities that we need to talk more about. And then on the other end, you had people that were literally burning Barbies in trash cans and talking about this like political ideology movement that is trying to be shoved down our throats. And I think the fact that there was such strong responses on both ends did lead to a lot of conversation about it, right? I
People
agree.
wanted to talk, yeah.
We heard it from even family members, that it's like, don't watch that movie, let's boycott, whatever. And then others were like, this is so cool. There's a message that's significant in it. And everybody it was like politics. Extremes, But I thought it was a fun movie.
Yeah, it was fun. At the end of the day, it was a really fun movie. I'm curious what you think this says, though, about God and his design for the human experience. Like, he's created us in such a way that there is this sense of desire. I don't know if it's for justice or what does this speak about God? The fact that we had such a response to a movie like that.
What does it speak about God?
Yeah, and his design of us, maybe.
Yeah, man, that's a good question. I mean, it's why we do At the Movies, right? Like, there's something about why do we feel certain emotions when we watch movies? No matter who you are, there are like when heroes win, you feel something. When there's inequality, you feel something. And I think this movie highlighted a bunch of that. And I think it speaks of the fact that God, no matter what culture you're from, and language you speak, how you grew up, every human has a baseline of like something God put inside of us that tells us we're meant for more, that tells us there is something bigger than us in the world, that tells us when one human is belittled, something about that feels wrong. And so, I mean, it revealed a lot about the human experience in general, all the emotions, bad and good. And it speaks that of us having a creator. I mean, I think that's at the end of the day what it does.
Yeah, that's good. So in the beginning of your message, you talked about the importance of facing your own mortality.
Mm-hmm.
That was like a part of the theme in the beginning of the film too, where Barbie it's a funny moment actually in the movie where she said, "Have you ever thought about dying?" Or I forget how she phrased it, but something like this, right? Talk to me about the importance of that question from a spiritual lens. Why is that actually an important, not just a funny question, but an important question to ask?
Yeah. A lot of people don't stop to think about the fact that we can die anytime.
Yeah.
And that we will all die. And that should reveal to us that there's a significance to how we live our days. I actually had lunch with a mutual friend you would know, who is a self-proclaimed atheist. And he's like older in age. And I just said, hey, do you think about the fact that you had a heart attack this year? Like you might die like this year. I might die this year. What's going to happen? I don't like thinking about that. Like, well, we have to face mortality. I think this is the question. If we don't face the fact that life is temporary, we don't make the most of our days and we miss out on big questions. So I think I like that scene of the movie. Like they're in a plastic world. They're all like having fun, pretending like it's just today.
Yeah. And
Barbie has a reality moment that I think every human should have, which is, have you guys thought about dying? And then the music goes, everyone's... Yeah. And then she realizes nobody wants to talk about that. Oh, never mind. It's like, dying. I forget what she says, and they keep dancing. I think that's how most people live life. Like they don't think about that reality.
I mean, yeah, we're living in a time now, especially in the West, where we have a lot of these luxuries and comforts that protect us from a lot of the incidents that could cause death at any time. That used to be a much more frequent things in the past. Or you would catch the flu and you could die from it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so mortality has been further removed just naturally because of all those things. I was thinking, we heard that talk from John Mark Comer the other day, and he was explaining how like early monastic days, they would keep skulls around to remind themselves of the imminence of death.
Yep.
What are things that we can do to remind ourselves or to keep that reality forward without being depressed, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, normalizing the conversation is a part of it, right? Yeah. If you're a parent, I think talking about it freely, I think there's a lot of moments we regret in life based on this, like our lack of facing this reality. It can be dysfunctional too. Like I actually, honestly, for me, I can be a little dysfunctional with how often I think about death. My wife reminds me of this, but like I think of this is kind of morbid, but I think of my wife and my kids dying all the time. And not necessarily in a way that makes me depressed, but I'm like, I feel this, what would happen? And it makes me make the most of every moment, like give you one extra hug, give you one extra kiss, say one extra, I love you. When I'm healthy, that's a really good thing. When I'm unhealthy, it can actually create a little fear in my heart. But I do think it's good to think about this. When if somebody in our life was no longer there, do we have regrets?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I had vacation a couple of weeks ago where two of my boys took a kayak to the beach, and it was really strange, but they didn't take a life vest. They took the wrong paddles. And then somebody saw them in the raging waters. Literally the wind started blowing crazy in Monterey Bay. And they called the police, the Coast Guard, the ambulances, everyone. So I arrive at the beach. There's police everywhere and Coast Guard. And they're all there for my two boys that were out in the water. And for a second, I didn't know what had happened. And I asked him, what's going on? Oh, there's two teenagers that went out. And he didn't tell me they're still there. So for like 15 seconds, I had that heart drop experience where like, did my boys just die? I know it's weird to say, but you have these flashes that go through your mind. Like, will I have regrets with that? And they were fine. But when they came back, it's the reality. We will face that. It could be today, it can be in 20 years, but living knowing that life is temporary helps you make the most of your days and live with no regrets.
That's good.
Mhm.
One of the things you tackle in this is the influence of others in who we become. You got this line where you said, when we don't know who we are, we easily become what others say we should be.
Yeah.
Can you give us some examples for today, what that looks like? Like, if I'm insecure about who I am,
Mhm.
how am I being shaped by others?
Yeah. Man, good question. I feel like culturally today we give words very little priority in terms of in light of the significance they have.
Mm.
So like every word I speak to you or to somebody else is actually shaping something inside of them. So everything we let inside of us shapes us.
Yeah.
And so our influences today are usually from a device, what we're seeing other people say, the comparisons that we have. All of that is molding our perception of who we are, which means we have to be extra intentional to hear what God has to say about us. Because what we hear often is there's a people better than us. They're on a trip that's better than our trip. They're having more fun this summer than we're having fun this summer. They're posting all the best versions of themselves everywhere. And those are voices. Those are things we hear quite often. Like they have better friends than you. They're having more fun than you. And we're on the other side of a screen hearing these subconscious voices from images and posts and things that we watch that someone's life is better than ours, which makes us feel smaller. So it's important. We have, in the message, we talk about this to stop to think, but what does God say about me?
Yeah.
God says you're his child. You are chosen. You are empowered. He died for you so that you can live a full and abundant life. So to create intentional moments where we put the words of God into our soul really is important for this generation to do more and more often.
Yeah. I think another thing that reinforces that with what we witness, whether it's for ourselves, we receive them ourselves, or we see other people receiving affirmation for things that are not necessarily healthy. And I think that reinforces also that kind of behavior, that we pursue these things because we see them being praised and elevated for things that actually, even admittedly, I bet the people receiving them would tell you it's not actually the things that are providing them the most joy, or they're always in the search of more of these things.
Yep.
And it's in this endless cycle.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right, let's talk about like one of the pinnacle moments in the movie, which was the speech.
Yeah.
So it was this great exposition of unreasonable expectations and unhealthy stereotypes and even oppressive behaviors that women still face today.
Yeah.
And I know this was also kind of a culturally divisive moment in the movie, right? That's probably what caused some of the Barbie burning moments. Why did you feel that moment was important for you to address in your talk?
Yeah. Honestly, this might make me look funny here, but I don't know if I watched that clip one time without crying. And even when I was preparing the message, I played it, and I remember I have my computer open because I'm watching, trying to feel the emotion, and my wife walks in, and I'm like wiping tears from my eyes, and it's not just because everything, there's a lot of truth in it. I have daughters, I have a wife, and I think there's a lot of truth, not just toward women. It's what stereotypes tend to do in culture, that even like in Christian culture, for those that grew up in the church, we have a ton of things in Christian culture that we think comes from the Bible, but it really just comes from cultural stereotypes. And a lot of the macho part of what it means to be a godly man, for example, that we say culturally in America, a godly man does this and this and this and this. And we're like, well, actually, no, that's cultural. That is not in the Bible. A lot, like 80%, I would say, is not. And those stereotypes hurt. They create division so that people that don't fit the stereotype feel belittled and feel like they can't be in a walk of faith like us because we've created a stereotype that doesn't really match their life. And that clip, man, it just highlighted the stereotypes of women and how it makes them feel, the expectations we've placed on so many women in culture that is impossible to me. And it stirred emotion in me big time, even in thinking of my own family.
Yeah. Yeah, you did a great job explaining how a lot of these things go against these stereotypes and these behaviors that I forgot the main actor's or the main character's name, but the things that she was facing, we're painting a picture of what women culturally are facing, and how it goes against the heart of God and even against the basic premise that men and women are created in God's image.
Yes.
So what then is our response then as followers of Jesus? What's our response to that speech? Like, how should we behave or respond to what we see?
Yeah, man, I think this is an area where Christians have a mandate to speak into, and very few actually do. The inequality of humans should be a primary message that followers of Jesus carry, because this is the thing Jesus did. So when he stepped into culture, what he did that stood out is he treated the beggar like the rich man. He treated the woman like the man, which in his culture was crazy. He treated the sick like the healthy. So this is what he did. He lifted the value of every single human. So when we follow Jesus, this is what we do. You see one person in your class they're lonely, they're being belittled, someone speaks next. The Christian should be the one saying, no. That we treat everybody like this is how we love. Like this is how this is what my master has taught us. You love people as yourself. No nation superior than another. No race is better than another. No gender is better than another. It doesn't mean we're all equal in terms of our contribution. Like we all are unique. It's part of the creativity of God. Each gender has unique contributions to society. Each ethnicity has. We're not all like, robots that look the same. But in our uniqueness, we carry the same value. And I think this is the beauty of followers of Jesus that we should display. There's a variety of ways to display your value, but we are all equally valued. And that really matters.
Yeah. Another thing, as you were talking, like even referring to one of your earlier points, when you were talking about the voice that shapes us, right? And you were talking about the voice of God. But I do think also we have a voice that can shape the people in the world around us. And so there's a responsibility on our end to use our voice to shape the world as well in the way that God intends it for it to be.
Yeah. I think where we most stink at this is even in people of faith, sometimes we forget what Jesus did. It wasn't just like equal value between gender and ethnicity. It was also enemy. And so a lot of times what we do is people that attack us, we tend to feel a lot of freedom to minimize their value. But Jesus, even with enemies, said you ought to love them the same way. And so when you think of war, when you think of people that are against what we believe, I know I'm getting in a controversial zone right here, but in the last few years, so many Christians did this thing of like, let me protect my rights at the expense of other people's, their own rights or their own values and their own, or of loving the enemy. So it's more like protect me versus lift you. And I think what the motto that Jesus had is, hey, I will lower myself so that you would rise, even you, my enemy. So I will let go of my rights to show you how worthy you are in the eyes of God, how much he loves you. It's a really difficult task. But I think it's the calling of those that follow Jesus.
All right. So that's actually a great segue, because it is a difficult task. And at the end of your message, you kind of wrap it up with this idea of redemptive purpose that we all have. And one of the key points you mentioned at the end is how that journey, it's not always easy. I would argue it's usually not easy. At least that's what you read in the New Testament for most of them. Then even paralleling back to the Barbie story, at the end, she actually chooses the quote, quote, real world, right?
Yeah, the hard path.
The world that has cellulite and patriarchy and death and all those things, right? And I think we have the tendency in Christian culture to relate open doors or things going our way as being the will of God, right? We'll even say things like the hashtag blessed, but we say we're blessed because we got what we wanted.
Yeah.
Right. But it doesn't seem like that goes in line with what we're talking about here, that the will of God does not necessarily ease and things going our way or the way that we want them doesn't necessarily precede the will of God.
Yeah.
Right. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, even, right, the most famous sermon of Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are those who are insulted, blessed are those who are persecuted. His perception of blessing was very different than most of ours.
And it means, the translation is actually you're happy.
Yeah,
right?
there's a favor, a happiness to those. Yeah. So in other words, the blessing, the favor of God is more internal than external, but culturally we attribute it to external things. And so what we do is when things are going well, or when it makes me happy, it must be God's will. When it goes wrong or there's barriers, it must not be God's will, is basically what you're saying. And I had literally this month of really clear incident of this in one of these trips. And, there was a young person that said, backed out of a trip we were in. And this person said, well, there's all these things happening that are not good. And I think it must be that it's not God. If it's not good, it's not God. And so this person backed out of an initiative that was to do good because there were barriers. And in my mind, I'm like, honestly, I feel like it might be the opposite. If you're doing something that has no opposition, God might not be in it. Make sense? So a lot of times we think, well, if God is in it, there should be no opposition, no hardship. Biblically speaking, most of the time it's the opposite. The people you find in the center of God's will were sometimes in prison and dragged out of cities and went through a lot of hardship. And so, man, I think it's very powerful when we think about our redemptive purpose to not think this means that everything's going to go really well and all the doors will be wide open. Jesus said, no, my path is narrow and it's hard. And in this world, there will be trouble, but I've overcome it all. So there is great joy. There's great peace. So my encouragement for people is, man, jump into your redemptive purpose, but know it's hard work. Yeah. And bringing value out of people that feel devalued might make others not like you. And when you speak up on behalf of somebody that has no voice, not everybody's going to applaud you. Sometimes they'll speak against you. Yeah. When you choose to go and serve your neighbor and love those that hate you, not everybody's going to say, congratulations. Sometimes they'll hate you more. Yeah. And it might just mean you're doing the exact thing God called you to do. And you'll be blessed in it, but the blessing is more internal than you might think. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I don't know if it's awesome, but thanks for the inspiration and thanks for the words and for sharing your thoughts with us on this and for your message. That was really encouraging, really helpful. I want to invite all of you guys to make sure you join us for our services during this series. We got 3 more coming up. You can find them at one of our campuses with the Echo.Church. See our locations there, our services every single Sunday. Or if you're joining us online at the Church Online platform at online.echo.church. And we'd love for you to join us there. We have services that are actually streaming every single day for that series, so you can only watch them there on that platform. You can also continue a conversation with us on this. Drop a comment right here. Let us know your thoughts, or if you have any further questions, we'd love to be able to continue that with you. And join us on our Discord community. We just launched this platform recently. It's a great way to engage, to meet new people, to have fun together, to continue the conversation. And we'd love for you to be a part of it there. That wraps up our time. Thank you so much, Pastor Filipe.
Thanks you guys
for joining us.
Spread
and
the
we'll
word.
See you on the next one.